So today's festivities involve Ansi Standards. Let's see if yeah, there it is. I even got the slides right. Boy, what a tough topic. It's really, really important to understand what Ansi Standards are about, which is why I wanted to do this class today. But they're not exactly the most exciting things in the world. But I'll do my best, and you can join in the fun and help make this as interesting as we can possibly make it. I also don't think it's going to be a full session today, so we may have time on the back end for chit chat or questions about other topics. Okay, but I figure we'll start off with Ansi Standards, and first a quick understanding of the name Ansi, which is the American National Standards Institute. And they are based in the US. And they are an organization that provides the methodology for writing standards in North America. Ansi Standards are accepted, or I guess accepted is a good word, both in the US and in Canada, although, as my Canadian friends will quickly point out, Canada has its own version of Ansi Standards, Canadian Standards Institute. And basically they take the Ansi Standards and they tweak them a little bit and make them work for the Canadian market. And that is an extraordinarily short, brief, and broad description of how that works. It's much more detailed than that. So before we get into what's going on, I want to give you a quick history. I know, history's boring. I want to give you a quick history of Ansi Standards before we get into the meat of this stuff. Ansi started out in 1916 as an organization. They recruited several other engineering and electrical engineering type associations to all get together and to form this group that would oversee the standards that were being written at the time, try and get some coherence, and harmony in the various things. They also brought in the U.S. military, the 4 branches of the U.S. military. And, they started not only writing their own standards, but looking at standards that were being written by other trade associations and, trying to, make them compatible with each other, if you will. Harmony is another word, an overused word. Okay, so that was in 1916. We're done with history now, and we're just going to start talking about what's going on now. What's happened in between 1916 and now? It's kind of like Italian driving. What's it behind you? Yeah, it'll no matter. Doing my best here, guys, doing my best. The American National Standards Institute, as I mentioned, is responsible for the methodology of writing standards in North America. They do not write standards themselves. What they do is they work with trade associations, and once they accredit a trade association, they identify the way that trade association will write a standard, so that when they're done writing that standard, it has the ANSI seal of approval on it. It gets an ANSI standards number, and it has that authority, if you will. Let's see. Yeah, the train of thought just pulled out of the station here. Sorry about that. So trade associations all over the place were writing standards, the ones that you're probably more familiar with come from organizations like the ASTM, the American Society of Technical Metals, the American Society of Safety Professionals, which provides the Z359 suite of fall protection standards that ANSI has adopted, and that the rest of the country, the rest of North America pretty much has adopted as the de facto fall protection standard that we follow, other than in addition to OSHA and the Canadian OSHA. I've lost a slide. Okay, well, I've lost a slide, so screw it. It's in there somewhere. It'll show up at an opportune moment, I'm sure. So we have trade associations writing standards, and they write their standards for their constituency, whatever that group is: safety professionals, engineers, and entertainment professionals. ESTA is an accredited ANSI standards writing body, and through their technical standards program, they write standards for the entertainment industry. And this is we'll start doing a little deep diving into that in just a couple of minutes. A couple of things to know about standards in general. They are guidance documents. They provide recommended practices. And to a certain extent, like a code of practice, if you will, again, for their constituency and anybody else who happens to want to pick them up and use them for the operation of the tasks or the jobs that they're doing at that particular time. It's important to remember that ANSI standards provide the minimum requirement. They don't. It's good to if you're doing a project, wiring a house, for example, you're going to follow the ANSI standards and the building codes for wiring that house, and you can do it to the standard, to the letter of that standard, and just don't do any more than what the standard tells you, and that will be the minimum that is expected when you're wiring a house. It's always okay to do more than that, however. All right, but it's important to remember that these are minimum standards. If you want to do better, go right ahead. It would probably be a good idea. It's also important to know that ANSI standards are voluntary. They are not mandatory. They are voluntary standards. There is no legislative body, there is no legal entity saying that you have to follow these standards. And before somebody jumps up and says something on it, the one caveat to that, let me get into chat here for a second. There it is. Okay. So they're voluntary, they are not mandatory. However, they become mandatory when an agency, a legal entity like OSHA, references them in one of their documents. So if OSHA says, thou shalt, wire a house this way as per ANSI 227.653, that 227.653 is now part of the Federal Register, as part of the OSHA rules and regulations, and it just became mandatory. For the most part, ANSI standards remain voluntary. And I think at this point, for all of the standards that are written in the entertainment industry, I think that they are all voluntary. They are not mandatory. We had one standard that was written into the Indiana State Legislature Code at one point. This was after the Indiana State Fair concert rig collapse. But after a couple of years, they removed it. And as far as I know, and they have not put it back in. So that is no longer a mandatory standard, it's voluntary. But let's look at what the reality of the situation, especially in the United States, is when we talk about voluntary standards. The way the legal system works in the United States when there is some kind of serious accident has an effect on what an ANSI standard, how an ANSI standard behaves. When, for example, there's an accident that gets OSHA involved, people are either a lot of serious injuries or a fatality, or some really, really serious damage, equipment damage or something, and OSHA is brought on site. They will do their investigation. They will conduct that investigation according to their regulations, and the decisions they make will be based on the regulations within OSHA. All right, so they do their thing, and maybe they hand out some fines or something, slap somebody on the wrist, whatever. After that is done, then the case typically goes into the civil court, and this is where the relatives of the people who were killed, or the families, or friends of the aggrieved parties, if you will, they take whomever they can find, whomever they feel might be culpable in the causing the accident. They'll take them to court, and where OSHA fines tend to be relatively small, even in fatality accidents. As far as I know, in the Indiana State Fair accident, which happened in 2011, I think, 7 people were killed. The largest fine that OSHA put out was still less than 6 figures. It was a high 5-figure fine, and that's for a fatality accident. Between you and me, and my feeling on a 5-figure fine, $80,000-$90,000 kind of a fine, when you're talking about a fatality, it's chump change. It's not enough money when you kill somebody. So then they go into the civil courts, and in the civil courts are where you will start to see the judgments that make the headlines, people getting 10, 20, 30, 40 million dollars for wrongful death cases and that sort of thing. So what that points to with an ANSI standard, sorry, I skipped right over the important part. Okay, then, going to be one of those days. So when there's a civil case and you're in there defending, suing, some promoter or producer because somebody got killed on, or one of your family members got killed on the show, if whatever the action was that caused the accident was covered in an ANSI standard at the time of that accident, and they did not follow the ANSI standard, the ANSI standard said, you're supposed to do A, B, and C, and you were doing X, Y, and Z, and there was a big accident. That ANSI standard that covered that situation will be brought into the case, brought into the trial, because ANSI standards, the ones that have been approved by ANSI and given an ANSI standards number, they have the force of law in court. They have case history after case history after case history that says ANSI standards will stand up in court. And if you're the producer and the ANSI standard says you were supposed to do A, B, C, and you did X, Y, and Z, the attorney for the aggrieved parties is going to find that standard. I can guarantee you that. And they'll bring it into the court, and basically you won't have a leg to stand on at that point. So even though ANSI standards are voluntary in nature, they only remain voluntary when you don't screw up. When you do screw up, you run a serious risk of ending up in a court of law and losing a significant significant amount of money. Okay, so yeah, they're voluntary, but in the United States, yeah, I wouldn't treat them as voluntary. I would treat them as mandatory because, as I say, if you screw up and you end up in court, they're going to come back and bite you. Pamela Hybridge asks, how many people work for Ansi? I have no idea, but it is a governing body. It is not a standards writing body. So their job is to make sure that each one of the trade associations is writing standards in the appropriate manner. And the way they do that is by auditing. So the ESTA, the Technical Standards Program for ESTA, we're an accredited standards writing body. We have, it's like 4 or 5 people that we deal with at ANSI on any given day. They will be conducting audits. We will be providing them with the required information and the log books of how we finished. We write a standard, so we have to provide all the information that they require to them about how we wrote that standard and all the various actions you have to take to get that standard written. Pamela also asked, are the Canadian standards voluntary too? It is my understanding that they are, but I can't say that for sure. And Canadian regulations tend to be provincial, and I don't mean that in a derogatory manner. They work from province to province. I don't know about ISO, couldn't tell you. I'm not sure what ISO has. What are you asking about ISO, Pamela? Could you let us know? Unmute. No?
I was just wondering if the ISO is like the same, the International Standard Association, if that's voluntary as well.
Yes, well, it is voluntary, but it carries with it a lot of cachet. I mean, companies go out and become ISO accredited because it identifies a manufacturing process, for example, that meets the ISO standards, and that's a good thing. So it's another tool in your marketing book. David has responded to Pamela in chat about Canadian voluntary standard. Yeah, the nice thing about the Canadians are nicer than we are. They don't sue people nearly as often as we do, but I hear they're catching up. So let's just to follow along with it. Let's remember that if you do something and you screw up and there was a standard in existence, you may end up having to talk to people like this. And that would not be nearly as much fun as talking to these people. Harry's passed away, right? Sarah, I can't remember the actor's name, the guy who played the judge. No, don't know. Okay.
I believe he did pass away, yes.
Yeah, okay. Fair amount of trivia with that show, but we won't get into that now. So let's switch over. If we're okay with the general premise and the general understanding of what ANSI is and what ANSI standards represent, then I want to talk about the standards that have come out of the Entertainment Association. And at this point in time, the only organization writing standards for the entertainment industry is ESTA through their Technical Standards program. The Event Safety Alliance was writing a bunch of documents, and there was discussion at one point as to how to make them more, more important, give them some more structure. And they thought about writing their own, becoming a standards writing body, but it became clear that the better path, the more expedient path, was to join with ESTA. So the Event Safety Alliance has joined with ESTA, and they write standards for the event industry under the aegis of the Technical Standards program. Okay, going back to the chat here, because Christy's asking something.
No, just letting you know, AVIXA has standards that apply for entertainment industry also, but they're more for the permanent installs.
What
Not as much for live event things.
Oh, thank you. What is AVIXA for our group here?
AVIXA used to be called Infocom. I compare it to USITT is for theater, like AVIXA is for AV. It is a professional association that provides entertainment and a large conference to help people get to know each other and keep up with what's going on in the industry.
Okay, and they have a standards writing body within that organization.
Yep, they have standards for building racks, how you label your cables, the amount of power that your speakers are supposed to have to cover a certain area, how a display should be sized for the room that you're in. It's more AV related and it's more for permanent installs, but all of it applies for the things that we do if you want to look at those also. And the cable labeling is brilliant. I wish we would use it more in live events.
Okay, well, we'll have to look into that. And if it is something that is appropriate, maybe the Technical Standards program can steal it. Because we're good at that. Canada, they pull in experts as needed in the event of an accident. Yes, they do. You get expert witnesses for both sides, and they go to town. And it's not a fun thing. I've done it on occasion. In fact, I just finished a case which they settled out of court, so I guess I'm allowed to talk to, but I haven't gotten clearance from the attorney yet. But sorry, yeah. So yeah, they do bring in experts, and occasionally, people like me. Oh, thanks, Jake. Sorry to hear about Harry. He was a good guy. I liked him. All right, let's go back to the standards here. So we have, within the Technical Standards program, as you see, written a bunch of standards, and we got more than 13 from the Rigging Working Group. And I should point out, just to keep things above board, that I am the co-chair of the Rigging Working Group, which is the working group that writes standards for the rigging industry in the entertainment world. So the short version of the process, working groups are the consensus body, and you'll see in a minute when I pull up the slide that we have a number of working groups which cover various disciplines within the industry. Rigging being one, floors, photometrics, fog and smoke. There are a number of working groups, and they are the overall consensus body. They decide on whether or not, first and foremost, a subject that somebody brings to them and says, hey, I think this is a good idea to write a standard. The working group will decide whether or not it's a good idea to make that standard, make it into a standard, and they make all the decisions throughout the process of writing a standard. Now, I bring this up, and I want to make sure that you understand that the working group is the body that does the voting. They're not the body that does the writing. And I want to bring this up because anybody who is thinking about joining the Technical Standards program and getting involved in this process, which I dearly hope that you do, I want to make sure you know what you're in for. The working group is a consensus body, but the group that does the actual standards writing is called the task group. So in the rigging working group, for example, somebody will bring up an idea that says, well, I think this is a great idea to write a standard on. And the working group, which has an active membership, people who actively attend meetings on a regular basis, of between 60 and 70 people. you can imagine what trying to get 60 or 70 people to write a standard would be like, and we'd never get anything done. So somebody comes in and says, let's do this for a standard. The working group says, oh, okay, that seems like a good idea. And then I get to assign a task group. And that task group will typically be less than 10 people. It will have a leader, and then it will have, 6, 7, 8, 9 individuals who have a vested interest, who are, experts in the field that is being covered by the standard that they're about to write. What this means is that the task groups do all the work. And so you need to know about this. When we do at a meeting, especially when we were doing face-to-face meetings, and we decided that it was time to write a new standard. When we got to the point where I would go to choose the task group, you could hear all the chairs moving away from the table and back to the walls as everybody got out of my line of sight, so that they didn't have to work on the task group. But task groups are needed. They write the standard, and what they do is they will, the working group meets 4 times a year, and the task group will be assigned a standard to write, let's say in January. And by the next meeting, which typically is in March, we will expect some kind of a rough draft of what this thing is going to look like. And by the next meeting, we get the rough draft at the March meeting, and the working group will go through the rough draft and make recommendations about what to add in, what to take out, how to edit and how to organize it. Task group goes away, comes back in July with maybe a better rough draft of the general outline, or maybe they've gotten to the point where they've written actually a very rough draft of the standard itself. We get to look at it as the working group. We get to look at it, make decisions, tell the task group, okay, that looks good, this doesn't, go back and deal with that. So once again, the working group is a consensus body. They are going to make all of the decisions. The task groups write the standard. Now, this process will go back and forth for a while, just to get the first, to get the standard into a rough draft form, and then into a good enough shape that we feel we can put it out for public review. That could take 2 years. We're only meeting 4 times a year. The task groups meet more frequently than that. Obviously, all of it's electronic at this point. But 4 times a year doesn't mean that things get done quickly. And this process is overseen by Ansi. I mean, we have specific ways that we have to go about dealing with this, putting a standard together. So, it's an involved process. And the task group, as they're writing it, they are advised not only by the working group as far as content, but by me and by the other the administrators within the program in terms of format, style, that sort of thing. So you can safely assume that even a very simple standard, it's going to take about 1.5 years, let's say, to be optimistic, to get it into good enough shape to send it out to public review. Now, this is the really important part of the process that, I wish we had better ways of getting everybody to know about them. But a public review is exactly what it says. It's, you put out, we have a document that we are going to make available to the general public, and the general public gets to review the document and then provide commentary on that document. Once that happens, it goes out for public review, so it becomes made available through various channels. And it's usually available for, I think it's 6 weeks. I don't have the exact time in the back of my head, but it's more than a day or 3. Hold the chats for just a minute. I'll get back to them in a second. So it goes out for public review. It stays out there for, I believe it's 6 weeks. And then people send in their comments. Those comments are collected, and then we have to respond to them. And ANSI requires that we respond to every comment we get, and we respond to it in a civilized and appropriate manner. We can't, we get comments that are just off the wall sometimes, and you really want to just kind of, make some comments back to the person who wrote it, usually dealing with their ancestry. But we're not allowed to do that. We have to make legitimate, constructive responses to the comments. And once we do that, then the document gets adjusted or rewritten based on the comments that we feel were appropriate, and we send it back out for public review again. And this process will go on as long as we get coherent, appropriate comments to the public review. If, for example, and this has happened where we get the same comment from the same person time after time after time, after the 3rd or 4th time that we respond to that person and they keep sending the same comment in, we get to write that off. We don't have to keep commenting to it. But we will go through the process until all of the comments are resolved and the document has gone through a final public review without any substantial comments made on it. At that point, the working group will vote on it, the standards committee will vote on it, the executive committee of ESTA will vote on it, and then we'll send it off to ANSI along with all the documentation about the process, and ANSI will determine whether or not it becomes an ANSI standard. Most of the time it does, because I have 2 very, very, very good administrators, Carl and Richard. Carl Ruling and Richard Nix are really good at what they do. And the documents going up to ANSI are in really, really good condition and meet the requirements for ANSI. Occasionally we'll get a question back or something that may hold up the process for a meeting cycle, but that's rare. Now, if you'll allow me here, I'm going to swing back to the chat because there's a bunch of questions in here that I didn't get to. David Pocock, oh, you asked me privately. See, I told you not to do that. We can get into that. Yeah, the answer to your question, David, he was asking me about a flying gear. There is a flying performer standard, which we will take a look at in a couple of minutes. All right, there is a flying, but it's not the one that was started by you and Tracy. Okay, let's see. Pamela asks, how many languages is ANSI Standards written in? English. It's written in English. Other places may translate them for their purposes, but ANSI Standards, because it's an American National Standards Institute, are written in English. Sarah says Spanish as well. Okay.
Translation is provided in Spanish.
Yes,
So.
yes. That's the standard translation is into Spanish. There are other organizations that have taken the standards and not adopted them, but they wanted to use them, for their, as they were developing their own standard, and they've been translated into, I know they've been translated into French and German. Well, ANSI standards on bamboo, they don't exist because, we don't build with bamboo in the US. It's an Asian practice. And Pamela, I got to tell you, just as a quick aside here, having worked in Asia, and when I was building a theater in Taiwan, I had, putting in the fire curtain, I had a 40-foot tall steel scaffold structure on stage right, the proscenium, and I had the same height bamboo structure on stage left. And that night we had a 6.4 earthquake, which is no fun when you're on the top floor of a hotel building. But we had a 6.4 earthquake. And when I came in the next morning to see what kind of damage had been done in the theater, the steel scaffolding was in a pile on the floor, just completely destroyed. And the bamboo was just sitting there ready to go. It was in perfectly good shape. Okay, 3 new messages. Where are we here? Yeah, Jake, don't knock it till you tried it. Okay, so let's move on. We've already done this slide. We talked about the working groups being the consensus body. The task groups are the people who actually get to write the standard. And, all kidding aside, I don't have any trouble at all getting people to write, to work on a task group and to write the standards without putting too fine a point on it. I have, as I say, 60 to 70 people in the working group who are active in that group, and they're all volunteers. Nobody gets paid anything. When we were doing face-to-face meetings, nobody got paid to travel or hotel rooms or anything. It all came out of our own pockets. But these people are the most dedicated volunteers I've ever had the pleasure to work with. So getting people to work on task groups is not a challenge. But I could always use more help. So anybody who wants to talk further about working on these, talk to me after the session. So here are the working groups as they exist today in the Technical Standards program. And we're going to talk about the rigging ones because, they're the ones that I'm more familiar with than anything else. But just to point out, give you an example of why some of these, how important some of these standards can be. I get when I show this slide at other classes and we go down the list and they go, what floors, what's the deal with floors? Why is that such a big deal? If you're a dancer, amateur dancer, professional dancer, whatever, and you're going into a theater that you've never been in before, and you can ask the production manager, the stage manager, whomever, somebody local to the building, if you can ask them what the resiliency of the floor is, and they can give you a number based on the ANSI standard, then you know what you're working with. You have now information that says, oh, this floor has got a resiliency of 5. So it's going to have this much bounce to it. I now know how much bounce I'm going to get. For a dancer, and I know that there's at least one dancer on the call, Sarah. That's got to be huge. Your tools of the trade, it's your body, and you want to take care of your body. You want to take care of your tools, and you don't want to damage it so that you can go and do the next job. And if you have this added ability to identify and be prepared for the way you're going to perform that night, so much the better. The floors working group also has a measurement, a metric for identifying the slipperiness of floors. Now, I don't know what that exact metric is. You can go and download the standard and find out. But even just like the resiliency, knowing how slippery that floor is going to be is a godsend, I would think. And it's more than just somebody telling you how many bottles of Coke they poured on the floor. This would be a good time to point out also, and Sarah, if you have the link, but the ESTA standards, the Technical Standards Program standards, are available for free from ESTA. As far as I know, we are the only organization that provides the standards for free. Every other trade association, they make you buy their standards, and they're not cheap at all. We do it for free because we have been underwritten. We get a very generous donation from an insurance company that allows us. I mean, that was the stipulation. We'll give you this amount of money, and we want you to offer all the standards for free. And oh, by the way, we want you to tell people that we did that. You know, that's the marketing part of that one. So should you be in the market for insurance down the road, the company that provides the money that allows us to put these documents out for free is called ProSight, PROSIGHT. They're very, very savvy for the entertainment industry. They understand what we do, and they treat us well. And I'm a very happy customer of theirs. All right, so that's the end of that commercial. Not in Canada yet? David, what do you mean not in Canada yet? David? Come in, David, unmute your mic.
There we go. They're not, that organization is not providing insurance, at least in Western Canada yet. We've seen some of their ads, but they're not following up yet.
Okay. Yeah.
I was looking into them for a couple of, for last summer, for a couple of the events that I was supposed to be working on.
Right. Okay, thank you.
I have a question, Bill.
Yeah.
Quick question, like on your resiliency of the floor, you can find out. So you said that like you would ask how strong the floor is. So you could, like, if you're going into the armory and you wanted to drive like a condor or a heavy machinery, those would be the times you're asking like how strong that floor is, like into the armory or something like that. But also, what about temporary structures like a stage? Like, can I put a genie lift on this? Can I put like a genie lift on a temporary structure stage and feel like comfortable that that's not gonna, the weight of it is not gonna like fall through?
Yeah, this is, thank you for that, Pam, but this is not a load load bearing definition. What the floor's standard states is if you build the floor a certain way, then it will have a bounce or no bounce, but it'll have a bounce of a certain amount or no bounce, depending on which part of the standard you used as your guideline to build that stage floor. It does not have anything at all to do with the ability of the floor to hold load. All right, so you wouldn't be able to go to that standard to find out if you could drive a forklift over it, for example. I don't know of a standard in the entertainment. I know that there isn't a standard in the entertainment industry that provides that information. You'll still have to go and talk to, you know, if it's a question, you have to go and talk to a structural engineer.
Would the Ansi standards also have a resiliency on like a temporary structure, like a stage floor that's hollow underneath, like a temporary structure?
Well, it depends. It really doesn't matter whether the structure is permanent or temporary. It's how you build the stage floor. All right. So you get the guidance from the standard to build the floor in a particular manner, and it doesn't matter to the floor whether, you know, it's in a tent or whether it's in a new high school theater, or they put a new floor into a Broadway house. So it's not really a question of temporary or permanent. It's a question of, okay, you just built that floor. What provision in the standard did you build that floor to?
Thank you.
Okay. And Canada, yes, the Harlequin Floor website is a huge resource. And thank you, Robin. Right, I think you're right. I just haven't done it in quite some time. I haven't tried to download the ESA book. Okay, so let's move over here. I've picked some of the standards that the Rigging Working Group has written, and now it's going to be a discussion of why these are important and how they have affected our lives. And let's see here. Oh, cool. Just checking the time. There's a whole bunch of standards there. If somebody has a question about one, I want to talk about wire rope ladders, because historically it's the first one we wrote. It was written in 1999. The first iteration was written in 1999 by our good friend Rocky Paulson. And now would be a good time to mention that when you write a standard, ANSI requires that every 5 years you do something with that standard. You have to at least review it and then decide whether you're going to leave it alone and renew it for 5 years, or you're going to change it, update it, again for 5 years, or throw it out. Those are your three options. And so from 1999, we have updated the E1.1 wire rope ladder standard a number of times. Rocky Paulson, as I mentioned, wrote the first one, and then he and I worked on 2 revisions. And then after he retired, I did the last revision. But I was the task group. It was a task group of 1 for this particular project because it was not that big a deal. But it's an excellent example of why standards are really important to our industry. And I suspect more than a couple of you have heard this story before, so bear with me. But in 2004, a gentleman named Wally Thomas took a fall off a wire rope ladder in Miami. He was climbing the ladder during the shift from the opening act to a David Bowie concert, and he fell off the ladder and he was killed. The details of that aren't germane to this conversation. What is important is that he was killed, so it became an OSHA investigation. And when OSHA came in to inspect the site, they were confronted with something they'd never seen before. There was this wire rope ladder, and they'd never seen one of those before. The investigator who came in, was like, "What is this?" Fortunately, we had a standard that was written in 1999 that covered wire rope ladders, and the ESTA office was informed that the accident happened and was given the information to send a copy of the standard, hard copy in those days, folks, but send the standard down to the OSHA office that was doing the investigation. I can't say this for a fact, but I would bet the rent that the OSHA investigator didn't even need to read the document. Once he saw that there was an ANSI standard that had an ANSI E1.1 identifier on it, then he had the ability to accept the wire rope ladder as an okay device. If that standard hadn't existed, he would have been under pressure, not only from the OSHA people, his superiors, because this ladder thing that they had never seen before was involved in a fatality accident. So he's going to be under pressure to rule against that ladder. in their investigation, but he's also, as I heard later, he was under pressure from the ladder industry, who was interested in this because they didn't know what this thing was either, and they didn't want it in their, they didn't want it as part of their program, if you will. So he's got a standard, he's got a document that says E1.1, ANSI E1.1. He's good to go, or she is good to go. They are good to go. Now, think about it for a second. What do you think would have happened if we didn't have that document and the investigator didn't have the ability to approve that wire rope ladder? If they had said, no, that wire rope ladder was involved in a fatality accident, that's a bad thing, so you cannot do wire rope ladders anymore. You have to find another way. Think about the effect that that would have had on the entertainment industry in general. We would have had to find another way to access all of the stuff we do overhead. In those days, focusing lights, fixing conventionals, going up to beat a moving light with a hammer to get it to work, all that kind of stuff that we did all the time, right? We would have had to find another way that did not involve a device that you could roll up and put into a road box. It would have changed everything about the way we do our industry. Okay, so that gives you a clear, I hope, a clear idea of just how important these standards are. Let's jump down to E1.21, temporary structures. And I should tell you that I have abbreviated, condensed all of the names of these standards. ANSI likes real long, flashy names, and they wouldn't fit on the page. Temporary structures is the standard that was initially written in 2006 that covered outdoor structures, temporary outdoor structures, concert rigs, whether they're in a stadium, a parking lot, or a cornfield. So when the Indiana State Fair accident happened, this standard existed and was, in effect, it was enforced at that time. Had anyone involved in that concert, had anyone followed the E1.21 standard, nobody would have been hurt and nobody would have been killed. Because the standard, part of the standard requires a management operations plan that was not in place when the weather hit that structure, or prior to the weather hitting that structure, and nobody really knew what to do. Nobody had a real operation plan. So I can't speak for the structure itself. I mean, I know I've read the reports on the structure, and I know that that structure was pretty much doomed from the beginning. But nobody would have been in it or around it or under it if they had utilized E1.21. So, and for what it's worth, we just revised E1.21 again 6 months ago. And so we've updated it, upgraded it, and made it better. All right, let's go over to the chat here and see what people are up to. Scott Oliver, the new requirement for state forest is 150 pounds per square foot. I believe you are correct, but this is not a resiliency. This is a load-bearing thing. And I don't think that the requirement on a load-bearing condition comes from the particular floor standard that we were referencing before. Yes, and Ashley, you're right. This is a per square foot. 150 pounds means that You know, if it's only rated for 150 pounds per square foot, I can't stand on 1 foot because it's not rated to hold me. It's based on 150 pounds per square foot over the whole area. David Glowacki. I'm reading this. I suspect everybody else is. Oh, well, thank you. I wasn't. Yeah. David, you own a portable weather station. I bet you your lawyer hates you. Can only assume. Robin, I'm right there with you, and I agree. Hopefully we will be able to continue that. I'm just reading these down, folks. Well, Ashley, you've got an interesting question. And this speaks to something that I've been trying to get people to do for a very long time. And it's easier now. And that is know that we have these standards. You know, you don't have to know every chapter and verse and every line of each standard, but know that standards exist and that there are ones that probably fit within the framework of what it is that you're doing on any particular day. And if you get into that situation where you see something and you go, geez, that's really wrong, you should have the wherewithal to either provide the information, go to management or your supervisor or whoever and say, that's wrong. And one of the reasons it's wrong, one of the many reasons it's wrong, is it doesn't meet the ANSI standard for this particular task that we're doing. And that standard is E1.1, and here's the standard. You can just hand them your phone and let them read the standard. I'm going to pull up the standards in a couple of minutes here and show you what they look like. It's hard. It's hard to be the one to have to blow the whistle because, a lot of people don't like when that happens because work stops and all that. But at the end of the day, if you don't blow that whistle, there are risks. And those risks could be anything from, a minor work stoppage as you fix the repairs for the accident that just created, to a work shutdown while you wait for the ambulance to get there. Have the ammunition, the material exists, and you should have access to it, or at least be able to point management, your supervisor or whatever, be able to point them in the right direction. And if you are management, you need to know that these things exist, and you need to know that you should have copies of them, on your phone, on your laptop, wherever you store this kind of stuff. Canna, is it pretty where you live, Canna? I've seen photographs, and sometimes it is, but a health and safety officer on duty, regretfully, that's not the rule here in the States. It should be, and it's probably written down somewhere where it says you're supposed to have a health and safety officer or some version of that on site at all times, but it's not true. It almost never happens. What can I say?
Bill, what standards were broken for the Radiohead Toronto accident where the stage fell and killed the drummer tech? Why would they overload the ceiling? Like, why would they even go there?
Well, I can't tell you, I can't respond to why. I don't know of a standard. We don't have a specific standard within the entertainment industry for overloading scaffolding, which is what they did. But
couldn't they have pulled up an Ansi standard and say, hey, no, we're not going to do this, and here's the standard and the reason why?
Well, there's not an ANSI standard within the entertainment industry. There are scaffolding standards, and frankly, I'm not familiar with all the scaffolding standards because occasionally I get to go to sleep. But I'm sure that there was a standard for that particular style of scaffolding that provided a load rating, and the load rating was exceeded.
But like, how could something like that happen? Like 2016, but I mean, like, it's still the 20th century and we have all these standards written, but how would something like that?
Well, now that's a whole different seminar, but the short answer is money. Time and money. People want to do things that are faster and less expensive. And, that is one of the byproducts of doing things faster and less expensive without doing your research.
And meanwhile, that's going to cost them a lot more money
Mm-hmm.
because, when you're saying you're going to save time and money, but if you look at the long run, did you really save any time or money?
No. This is not something that, this is a really good point, but it's not really something that we want to get into today. But yeah, I mean, you don't follow the standard, you screw up and something goes wrong, and the only reason you were not following the standards because you didn't want to spend the money, well, you're going to spend 100 times more money on the legal defense, if nothing else. Ashley. Good question.
Can I bump in here? Just to say that the WHO have already written COVID standards, and they have specific COVID risk assessments for the entertainment industry that you can download.
All right, you kind of say, who was this?
The WHO, so the World Health Organization.
We almost got into a baseball
Sorry.
thing here. No,
they've created their own risk assessments for COVID, and there is a section within that for COVID in events, and I've ended up doing a course on coping with COVID in events and what things you have to factor in and how you go about crowd control and all that nonsense.
Right.
But they are downloadable if you want the forms from them, or use them as a guide and editors as necessary.
Right. And it is the World Health Organization. Contrary to some opinion, they do know what they're talking about. At least in my opinion, anyway. But in terms of writing standards for COVID type things, I don't see ESTA doing that because it's not our area of expertise. What I do see is a guidance document of some sort, which I would hope that collates. I mean, I don't know. I don't see it happening right away because there's so much information that is already out there, and it's changing so quickly. As we learn more about this particular disease and infectious diseases in general, at some point, I would hope that somebody, whether it's within the technical standards program or not, would take that information and collate it and put it together into a guidance document. Now, we're getting a lot of that from organizations. The Event Safety Alliance has done a lot of work on that. The PERG people have put a bunch of documents together. OSHA has information. So, hopefully as we progress, we keep getting more information, we learn more, and we find ways of coordinating that information so that it begins to make some sense to us all. Okay, from Ashley. Yeah, I agree. I mean, but we are a niche industry, and we're going to have to make we're going to have to make some choices on our own. But at the foundation, we want a good strong basis for making those decisions. And Whether they're for profit or not, I don't know that that's applicable at this stage of the game. USITT from David Glowacki. He's just got up a link there, a website. Let me swing back. Let me drag this kicking and screaming back over into standards, because there's one other thing that I want to point out that has happened over the years that speaks to and continues to speak to the importance of standards. If you look at E1.22 and E1.4, counterweight systems and fire curtains. I've been doing this a long time. We've been doing inspections for a very long time. And for many, many years, I was the one in whenever I could, when I was talking to a school district or a small college somewhere, trying to convince them of the need to get their rigging systems inspected. It fell on deaf ears because they had no real good reason to do so. There was nothing forcing them to do it. And they knew that once somebody came in there and did an inspection, they were going to find stuff wrong. It was going to cost them money that they didn't want to spend. Whether they had the money or not wasn't the issue. They didn't want to spend it, was the bottom line. And they didn't have to, because there was nothing out there that said, if you don't get your theater inspected, then and something happens, there's going to be trouble. There will be legal trouble. In 2009, both E1.4 and E1.22 came into being, and both of those documents, as part of the documents, stated that the rigging system and the fire curtain systems had to be inspected annually. Within 18 months, I'm no longer pounding on school district doors or college doors. They're calling me, because their attorneys, their AHJs or their health and safety officers, whomever, who had a clear understanding of what an Ansi standard meant from a legal standpoint, they understood that now they've got to do this. Otherwise, if something goes wrong, they're going to be held liable, and it's going to cost them, considerably more money than what that inspection is going to turn up. So they created, in essence, a sea change in the way theaters are dealt with in North America, especially in the United States. Inspections now, it's the norm. It's common. Everybody, it's like, oh yeah, I get my theater inspected once a year. It's just an accepted principle, and it wasn't all that long ago, 10 years to be exact, when it was an impossibility trying to get people to do that. Dennis, thank you, and have a good afternoon. Okay, so what are we doing on time here? Oh, we got 15 minutes left. Okay. I'm going to get out of, unless I don't think that I have anything else on the screen. Does anybody have any questions about any of the standards that are up in front of us? I can go to another spot and show you what these standards look like. Let me go to chat here for a second. Tyler DeLong. I'm not going to get into, how do I put this without putting myself in this way? All right, no, I'll play it. We'll do this straight. Tyler is referring to E1.47, which is an inspection standard, how to conduct theatrical inspections. And while I believe some parts of the document are good and they're very helpful, other parts are not. When the document was finished and approved by the rigging working group, the majority of the people in the group approved it, so it became a standard. I think, I had my own opinions, which I voiced. They were not accepted. So, there are certain things about the standard that I don't like, and I'm not a fan of the fact that there is a level 1 and a level 2 inspection. I think that a level 1 is a cursory kind of walk around, look at an inspection, and a level 2 inspection, for better or for worse, is putting a wrench on every nut and bolt, going through every piece of equipment. A lot of people say they do level 2 inspections, but they don't, because it takes a week and a couple of Sundays, to get a level 2 inspection done correctly. I don't know if Tyler, if that answers your question about the difference between the two. You say you've heard different interpretations. Have I offered you yet another different interpretation? Tyler?
Hey, Bill. Yeah, another different opinion on the interpretation of it.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, from what I can tell, yeah, level 1 is inspect what you can get to easily, and level 2 is all right, now go back and get everything you couldn't get the first time, but only do it once every 5 years.
Yeah, well, see, and this is where we're running into problems where some inspectors are promoting a level 2 inspection on an annual basis, but they don't do a level 2 inspection. They do a level 1.5. The document has created some confusion. As I said, I only get one vote. I may run the working group, but I only get one vote.
All right, thank you, Bill.
Okay. Owen has asked, is there a standard for theatrical grids? When you say a theatrical grid, I'm assuming you're meaning the walkable grid at the top of a stage house, and there is not a standard for that.
Sorry, I should have said not that kind of grid. Yeah, right. There's multiple kinds. I meant like a theatrical pipe lighting grid in a black box type theater. Interesting
that you bring that up, because there is not one. And at the next meeting, I intend in January, I intend to bring that up and offer it as a new project to write a standard for what a lot of people call a TV grid, or a pipe grid.
Yeah, exactly, because that's usually the part of the industry that it comes from the most. I'm asking only because I'm in the midst of a capital plan, to put one in one of our theaters, and talking with the supplier about just what a normal grid actually means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like asking a stagehand for an opinion. If you ask a stagehand for an opinion, you're going to get 3 or 4 opinions, right? There's a joke in there somewhere, but it didn't quite work out the way I wanted it to.
Yeah, they're all from the same guy.
Yeah, right. James is looking for the E1.1 for wire rope ladders. I don't have the standard in front of me, but you know what? Let's get out of here. Okay. And let me, if you'll bear with me for just a minute here. Where did... Okay, so let me share the screen again. Come on. Why am I not getting? Oh. Okay. I may not have been able to do this properly because I don't know that it'll let me. Yeah. Wire rope ladder standard. Okay. We go through all this. Is just boilerplate, tells you who was involved and all that stuff, and I don't think anybody cares. So let's talk. You were talking about construction. So I suspect we're looking for section 6.1. 5 components.
We're not seeing the PDF, we're seeing the,
All right, so they're not seeing the whole thing. So how do I do this so that they can see the PDF?
you have to bring that screen to the front, I think.
That do it?
No, I'm just seeing, what I'm seeing is your directory. I'm not seeing the actual document.
All right, folks, bear with me here. I'm not sure that I can do this unless somebody has.
Can you put the file in the chat?
Are you working with 2 screens, Bill?
No, I'm only working with one.
Never mind then.
Okay. All right, I just put the file in the chat. So
Not seeing it.
Hey, Bill, this is Jimmy. I have it right in front of me, and I'm looking at the 6.1.1 ladder rungs
yeah.
and the 6.1.2 ladder rails, and it doesn't say anything about the diameter in there.
No, and it's not going. I know that's where we were going with this. It's not going to tell you what the actual size needs to be, but it does tell you what it needs to be able to do.
Yes.
For those of you who can't see this, the ladder rungs, for example, shall be such that a 3-inch wide load of 1,000 pounds applied to the center of the rung shall not cause permanent deformation of the rung. So you got to build the ladder to be able to withstand a 1,000-pound load hanging from the center of the rung. And the rails also, and that will define the rail size, because if the rung doesn't fail but the rails do, then you did it wrong. So they don't identify the construction diameters and stuff. They give you the parameters and let you decide what you want to make it out of.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So I have failed miserably in getting this document up to the front. I don't understand. Oh, I see why. David, because I did. Yeah. Let's try that this way. I bet you everybody can see it now, huh? Okay.
Yes, we can see it in the chat.
Okay. And so you can open it, right? Now, can you see it on from my screen? I just opened it from the chat, and I can. Sarah, can you see it on?
You have to share your screen again.
Aye.
I know, there's so many things.
Yeah. I just wish I was better at this sort of thing.
Well, you're good at rigging.
Okay. So I'm sharing that. Where'd it go? Did that do it?
Yay!
Yes.
All right. Well, I apologize for my ineptness, folks. Just this will just give you an idea of the way these documents tend to be worded. Where do we? There are the. Okay, so you can see how we describe what it's got to be able to do, but we don't tell you exactly how to do it. You get to make that decision. because you may want to make a wire rope ladder with 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch wire rungs, not rungs, but rails for some reason. And, you know, you get to do that. The other thing that this wire rope ladder did, this standard did, that I, for one, was very thankful for, was it does not permit the use of a wire rope ladder taller than 50 feet. So if you have a higher, if you have to climb higher than 50 feet, you can climb the ladder, but then you have to be able to step off of the ladder onto some kind of a structure that will allow you to stop and rest before you go and continue to climb either another ladder or get back on this one and continue up. Okay. So it's 3:30, folks. We've kind of reached the end. I can show you, assuming that I can figure out how to get other standards up on the screen, but you know, this is relatively good example of how these things look. We talk about the geometry, right? Any questions from anybody at this point?
Is there a standard for like motors being used for lifting people, like, and they have like their own pickle control in their own hand? Like, is there a standard for all those lifts where they hook up themselves instead of using the ladder?
So you're talking about the limpet and some of the other safety devices that they use to, that we use pretty much incorrectly to raise a technician up to a truss or get a technician down from a truss. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Yeah. The devices are built to standards. I'm not sure, they're not within the entertainment standards. We don't have any standards that cover those devices. You may find them in some of, I haven't gone totally into the rescue standards in the Z359. You may find some of that in there. Talking to the various manufacturers, however, there are 1 or 2 here in the States, and there are a number of them in Europe, but talking to the manufacturers, not the salespeople, but the manufacturers, and you know, somebody back in the engineering department, and explaining what we do with them in the entertainment industry isn't met with approval. They don't like that. Most of these devices are designed as a rescue system, and you know, where you're lowering a victim who has a secondary suspension, a secondary line on them, and the standards will call that out. But there's nothing in the entertainment industry. You know, if you're looking for more information on that, go to one of these guys' websites, and there should be an identifier somewhere on the site that comes from the label that's on the device that will reference an Ansi standard, and that standard will be the one that identifies, you know, what they use to build the device. 8 new messages. I'm slipping here. Yeah, right, Ashley. Yes. Folks, I think we've reached the end of this one. I want to respond to Noel quickly. You're talking about the fall protection standard. The E1.22, the fire curtain standard, does require that the fire curtain be in place, as in lowered down to the floor, whenever you are not using the stage or the auditorium and require access back and forth. Okay, it is supposed to be down. All right. I want to point out to everyone that we are not meeting next week. We're skipping a week because there's this thing happening on Tuesday that no matter what the outcome, I don't think I will be sober enough to do a class on Wednesday. But we will be back the following week, and we will take an in-depth look at counterweight systems. I know we already talked about the fly rail, but we did that from a safety standpoint, not so much from an operational standpoint, and that's what we're going to get into for that one. We'll follow that up with a motorization standard, motorized winches. And on the, I think it's the 25th, the week after, we will reconvene the equity and inclusion session. And for those who may not have seen the announcement earlier, equity and inclusion will now become a monthly session that we intend to do for as long as there's an interest. Okay. So thank you all for putting up with me today, and have a good afternoon, have a good rest of your week, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Take care. And for those of you who are still here who want your ETCP credit, don't forget to let me know. I see you there, Judith.
Hey, Bill.
Yeah.
How are you? Good to see you. Thanks for doing this again.
Oh, Scott, there you are.
Hiding somewhere on a screen.
Yeah.
Do you want to meet privately about the screen sharing stuff? I've learned some stuff with working with some of our faculty too that might be helpful if you want to catch up later this week or something.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I'll send you an email, okay?
Okay, yeah, that would be great. I was going to say we could meet at the Four Aces, but I don't think they're doing outdoor dining anymore.
Yeah, I'm not sure about Lebanon. Hanover, I think today is their last day for outdoor dining.
Yeah,
different towns are doing different things.
Well, yeah, but there's a COVID thing going on, and I was at the Four Aces on Sunday, and
Yeah.
and she said, and Leanne said that it was probably going to be their last day.
Oh yeah.
Which is yeah. I don't mind the cold weather.
Yeah. Food real quick.
Yeah, but let's talk later this week about the whole screen thing, because I'd like to get better at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Great.
Yeah.
I'll be in touch.
Bill.
All right.
Yeah, Bill. Riders never worry about the weather.
Riders never worry about the weather. Riders who like to stay alive always worry about the weather.
Well, we don't worry. Okay, worry is the wrong word, but it's the truism is if you don't ride in the rain, you don't ride, right?
Right. Well, that's true. I don't like riding in the rain, but I don't mind it. I don't know if you were following any of the long reach stuff that just took place over the last 11 days, but
yeah, I did.
Yeah, and
I hope that next year, this next summer things work out that I can come down and join you guys.
Yeah.
I might even have Serenity back up and fully running.
Oh, okay, cool. Folks, if you have no more questions, I'm going to have to. I'm in a rental space that I've only rented for a certain period of time, so I only have a few more minutes. I see you guys are still here. Do you have questions, or do you just like looking at my smiling face?
I was hoping you might have information of a class series for the ETCP electrical stuff. I enjoy the rigging stuff, and I know it's kind of a crossover in a lot of ways, but I'm looking for certification information for the electrical side, for that, more attuned to that.
All right, so if you're looking for certification information, have you downloaded the candidate handbook yet?
I'm looking at my third renewal at this point. So what I'm doing is looking for classes more in tune with the electrical and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Right now, I don't know. I mean, I always point to Richard Cadena. But I don't know what he's up to. And I have nothing's crossed my desk within the last 2 months at least that had anything going on with electrical. Doesn't mean it's not happening. I'm not, as you're not tuned into the rigging side of it that much, I'm not tuned into the electrical side. But maybe check in on the ETCP website and go check out the training programs and see if they have anything. Ooh, I just remembered. There will be a newsletter, an ETCP newsletter coming out because I just sent my info in. I think that they're going to send it out maybe next week. And they were collecting calendar information from the various trainers and training programs. So hopefully that will have electrical info in it. So, and being certified, that should show up in your inbox at some point.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure.